So in the last video we configured our Apollo server and we defined the schemas all here under GraphQL folder, the schemas resolvers, and we also set it up. So now in this video what we'll do is we'll configure our Apollo client and fetch the data from the database. So I've got this app running. I've cleared all that initial code here, and I've also set up Tailwind CSS. So let's start then. So in order to begin, open your terminal and head over to Apollo client docs, not the server this time. If I scroll on top, we'll have to copy this line of code and install the dependencies, which is Apollo client and GraphQL. Then scroll down. We'll have to set it up. So in order to set up Apollo client in Next.js 13, what you'll have to do is you have to create a folder called components, then components, and inside the components we'll have a file called providers.tsx RAFC. Now all our providers go in this file. So here what I'll do is I'll import this, I'll put it here, then I'll copy out these two lines and I'll paste it here. After that we'll have to give it the Apollo providers. So instead of this I'll give Apollo provider. Let me correct all this. Actually, let me go down, hit enter, Apollo provider, put this here, and I'll remove this. I'll also remove this, give a bracket. Okay, and I'll have to give it a client here, client. So instead of providers we'll have to pass in children. So here I'll say children, and I'll give the type definition also children react node. Okay. Then here I'll take this out and put the children here, curly bracket. So with that our provider is set up. Now head over to apps, go to layouts, and here under body we will give it the providers, and then give it here. So with that we've set up Apollo client. We go back here, refresh. Okay, I'll have to run the server, and I refresh it. Let me see whether I'm getting any errors. Okay, this is because here you'll have to explicitly mention that it is it should not be used as a server component. So use client. This is a Next.js 13 thing, and if I refresh this, everything works. Now let us create a component called novels.tsx, and I'll give it the initial boilerplate code, and I'll go back to page, and here I'll give it the novel, the component which we just created. I save that, I refresh this, I'm getting the component here. So then now let us actually get the data from Apollo server. So before that, let us go to localhost 3000 API GraphQL. So okay, so let us actually get we'll use novels query and we'll get everything here. I'll get the ID, image, title, updated at, and I'll execute this function. As you can see here, Prisma is making all the queries for us. So we are getting now all the novels which are there in the database. So in order to actually execute this from the client side, what we'll do is under GraphQL folder, let's create a file called let's say queries.ts, and here let us import from at Apollo at Apollo client, will import GQL. So this is basically to execute the queries. Apollo client uses something called GQL. So I'll create that query now, export const, and by convention we have to capitalize everything. So get novels, and then I give GQL backticks, and I can just copy this out as this is the query. So copy this out, paste it here, and save it. Next, what we'll do is let's head over back to novels, and here let us destructure data from use query hook which Apollo client gives us, and then we'll have to give it the query which we just created, which is get novels. I save that and let's see whether it works. I'll console log out the data, save it, go back here. Okay, so this is basically because this also should be since we are using hooks here, this also should be a client component. So if I open my DevTools and I go to consoles, okay, I'm getting undefined. Let's see why that is. Const data, I'm console logging out the data. Get novels. Let's go back to queries, see what we did wrong here. Export const query. If I go back here, this query works properly. Okay, so export get novels, use query. Strange. Let's see. Let's get dot novels from it. Let's see what we get. Save that. Oops. Let me check what it is. Data is undefined. Okay, this if I put question mark, it should fix it. Still getting undefined. Course origin error. Okay, I get what the mistake is. Let's go back to providers. This actually should be the URI for our this endpoint, pages/API/GraphQL. So instead of this, I'll take http://localhost 3000/API/GraphQL. Okay, I think that's enough. I'll save that again and see what I get. Okay, so this time I'm getting the object which I want. Arrays and I'm getting all the data from it. So let me head over back to novels. So this basically is working. Now let us actually save this. We get two other things from useQuery, which is loading and error. So if I come down here and say if loading is true, return p loading, and if there is an error, I would say something as return p, oops, something went wrong. I save that, and if I refresh this, you can see here when the data is loading, we get a message loading, and if there was an error, this message would have popped out. Next, what we'll do is we'll create a type definition for the novels data which we'll be getting. So let's say const novels is equal to data to be optional novels, and let's create a type definition for this. So let's call it let's say iNovel, since it will be an interface. It will be an array of this. So let us create this. To our root directory, let's create a typings dot d dot ts, and let us create that interface iNovel extends novel authors will be from author array. I save that, and okay, so this basically means okay, I'll have to import that. So I can using Prisma, when we're using Prisma, we can actually use this as a type definition. So in order to do that, we could just import it from at Prisma client. We can import those models, author and novel, and I save that. So this basically means now all the attributes of novel, I extend it to iNovel, and I add another field called authors. I want an authors of array of author, which is a model here, model. So that's a good thing about Prisma. You don't have to create a type definition over and over again. I'm doing this because when we are accessing the if you want the type definition of this, as you can see here, it doesn't provide us with the array of objects for authors. So that's why I'm doing this additional coding here. So I'll close that. I think I'll have to import that. Let me see. Add typings. So I've basically gotten that now. So now let me create the UI for it. So I'll just paste it out here because I don't want to waste too much time there. So I've written all the Tailwind CSS code here, as you can see. If you in the future videos, if you want me to actually type the Tailwind CSS codes live, I could do that, no problem. But as this video is just to show you how Apollo client works, I skipped that portion. So I've styled the body of the form here, and I've also added a header component here, and I've put it inside the body, the header, so that the header is available in all the pages. So once that's done, let's actually create a mutation for adding a novel. So for that, let us go to Apollo server again, and if I expand this a bit and I go back, I uncheck this, I go back again, uncheck that mutation. Let's add a novel now. We'll need an image, we'll need a title, we'll need an author, we'll get back the authors, and we'll also get all the other fields as well. So now we can just copy this. We can head back over to Next.js. Under GraphQL folder, let's create a new file called mutations. So this is basically just to structure everything out properly. If I would put this query add novel over here, it would be even more messier. So just for it to be easier for people to look to the code, I've structured it this way: GQL, I'll import GQL from at Apollo client. Now let us export const, let's call it add novel, again all in caps because we'll follow the standards, and I'll just paste it here. If I here, I'll save this now and I'll head back over to novel, and now let us use that mutation. So in order to do that, what you'll do is let's put this here. Actually, I'll put this here. Now it looks better. Const add novel, this is just the name. I'll get this from use mutation, and I could just add, I could put the query which I just created in here inside this, and I'll save that. Now I've created a handle submit for, like, if I go back here, I'm using title for tracking what the users put in this input, and image, the URL of the image in this input. So I'm tracking that here. I've also created a handle submit, and if it is empty, there will be an alert of saying enter fields. So now in order to execute this mutation, what you would do is you would just come here, call that function, function which you just created, and inside that we'll have to give it two variables, which is variables, because as you can see here, this takes in two variables. So in order to actually give this query its variables, you'll come here and just type image and title, and you can save that. You could also come here and do the same if you're using variables. So I come here, variables, and I give it an object, image and title. I save that. Now let us try whether it works or not. Actually, looping over that. Okay. Anyway, let's just check whether it's working. Network reload. I'll just say it's still loading. Okay. So now let me just say test title and test URL. I add the novel. I should get okay. So we made an error. Let's see what that is. Prisma no invocation where ID string test. Args are listed in green. Okay, let me see what the mistake was. So go to mutations. this image title. Okay, let me go to queries, not here, schema. Add novel should have image and a title, should return one. If I go to resolvers, if I go under mutation, add novel, it has a okay, I think there's an error here. Mutation, add novel. Okay, this should be, instead of, we've actually missed spell this should be add novel and this should be update novel. Okay, so I'll just yes, I'll use create here, and I'll just replace this. No, I'll take this out. I'll put it here and make this update, and I'll click enter, paste this here. Oops. Okay, anyways, let me where id is equal to, not is equal to, set it to ask id, and I give a comma here, so that fixes it. Add null, update null. Okay, let me close that, check again, let me refresh this. Let me, what is this? Okay, anyway, never mind this. Let me clear everything, reload everything. Okay, let's test title, test URL, and I hit add null. Let me see. Okay, the variables which we sent was test URL, test title, and the response is the object which we are getting. So new object was created. So this works now. Now let's see what we'll do next. We'll loop no, we'll actually get the data here now. So in order to do that, once again, let us go here. I've commented this out already, and create a new component called novel to get the individual novel. So new file, novel.tsx irafc to get the initial boilerplate code. Save it. I'll have to import this. I'll also have to give it a type definition, the props which should be coming. This novel should be a type I novel. I'll destructure novel here, and I'll give it the props. Save that. I save this. Now it comes up here. So now let me paste the, let me see what we're doing here. Okay, let me paste the styling for it here. Typed in all the styling for this, and basically here we are not getting an image because we didn't provide a valid the image URL. So if I go back here and I open npx prisma studio, hit enter, and go here to novel. It takes some time to load usually. Okay, as you can see here, I've not given it a proper URL. That's why here there's nothing coming up. So let's check again. Let's try posting another data now. Let's say test 5, and let me give a random. No, actually what we'll do is we'll say we'll go to Google. We'll take dopamine. It's not a novel, but I guess the job done. I'll take the URL of this, copy image link. I'll go back here, say dopamine, and I paste the URL here, add novel. If I refresh the page, I should be getting that new novel which I created, yeah, down here. So as you can see here, it's not immediate. As soon as I add a data, it doesn't reflect here. So for that to work, what we'll do is, if we go back to where we are making the query, where we are adding the novel, so use mutation has another field called refetch queries. So let me type it out, refetch queries, and this will, I want to get back all the novels. Get novels, no, it was query. Get novels. So this basically means that whenever we are adding a mutation, it has to refresh the queries which we've mentioned here. So get novels. So get all the novels. Once I add a new data, get me all the novels. Make a new query again. So let's test that out again. So let me go this time to say Harry Potter. Let's take this one. I copy the image link. I go to create next app. I say Harry Potter, and I give the image URL, and I hit add now. Now it should come up here. Yeah, it's come up here. So that is working. Next, let's create a mutation for deleting the novel, since it's we don't want all this. So let's go back to mutations, and to make a delete novel, let's copy this out and I paste it here. I rename this to delete novel GQL, and this should change. So let's head back over to Apollo server, go back. Instead of add novel, we'll use delete novel, and we'll get everything back again. So usually what you would do is you would only get back the data which is relevant to you, but since this is for demonstration purpose, I'm getting everything. So I'll copy this out and I paste it out here. And again, this should match the what you've mentioned here. Delete novel, this should be matching. Delete novel, delete novel. I've done, while I was building this application before, I've gotten that error. That's what I'm saying. So once that's done, let's go back to novel. Okay, close that, close this. As you can see here, I've made a button here, on click. Let's create a mutation for it now. So let's go here, const delete novel, use mutation, and let me say the one which we just created. So delete novel, I'll say it to refresh the queries, and refresh the queries, query get me all the novels. I think we imported that. Okay, so if I go back down, I uncomment this out, delete novel. It takes in variables, which is, if I go back to mutations, takes in a variable called delete novel id, so we'll have to feed it that. So variables id is equal to id is equal to novel id, the id which you want to delete, the id of that. So that we are getting from, if I go back to novels, we are looping through this object and each object has an id. So when we are feeding it to this component, the id is stored in this object. So I'm accessing that over here, novel.id. So if I save that, go back here, I delete this. Okay, I got an error. Let me check what that is. Okay, so let's head back over to novel, and I think we made a mistake here somewhere. So here, if I see its id, if I go back to mutations, novel. Okay, yeah. So this mistake is basically in the variables for mutation. I'm saying there is an object, the key is id and the value is novel id, but in the mutations I've defined the key as delete novel id, so there's a mismatch. So I think in order to correct this, if I just copy id and I mention it here and I save that and I refresh this just in case, and I scroll and I delete one, so it might take some time to delete. Okay, so that now works. So the mistake was there was a mismatch between the variables. And you could, as you can see here, I've given the variables here. You could also put it here. You could make a new object calling it variable here also. Either way works fine. I'm just choosing to use it this way so that I can demonstrate it to you. So now that our read, create, delete is over, next let us actually create a let's let's create a link for actually going to this page. So as you can see here, I have a link here, href, which goes to the base URL which I've created here, which is basically localhost 3000, whichever you're deploying. Base URL slash novels slash novel id. So in order to create this page, what you would do is, under app, you would create a folder, not a file, create a folder called novel, and novel should have an id. This you could basically name it whatever you want. I'm just choosing to call it id, and inside this there will be a file called page.tsx rafce for the snippet. I will call this novel and I save this. Now if I go and click read more, okay, I'll go and click read more. It is navigating me to this page, novel and the id which we are passing. So in order to access this params for in Next.js 13, what you would do is you would just go here and call it params, and for now I'll just name it any. I'll console log this params dot id. I save that. So as you can see, I'm getting the id now. So this will make a couple of changes. This will be a client side, so use client, and inside the props will have params. Inside that there's an id core string. We could actually directly destructure id, so I'll do that. id, and this will be from props. And if I console log this out and save this, open my DevTools, I'm getting the ID here. So we've successfully gotten the ID from the URL. Next, what we'll do is we'll get the individual novel. So for that, we'll go back to queries under GraphQL folder. We'll copy this out. We'll paste it here. We'll call it get novel. And let's head back over to Apollo server. Go back, uncheck mutation, query, novel. I'll get back everything, including the authors. I'll copy this out and I'll paste it here. Also rename this to ID and I save it. Now let us use query and get that. So for that, const data use query, and if I give this called get novel, I have to import this. And I save that. I console log out the data, and if we go back here, refresh it, undefined. That is because, okay, you'll also have to give it variables, because as you can see here, if I go to queries, it needs a variable ID for accessing the individual novel. So here we go back, variable, and we give it the ID. That way, let me, okay, so I'm getting it. So I got the individual novel now. That's great. Now let me actually paste out the stylings for this. So as you can see here, I've pasted out the stylings. So I have 3 inputs, each of which I'm tracking its value with 3 states, which is name for author name, title and URL. Title and URL for the updating the title of the novel and the picture as well. So if I scroll down, let's go with the updating the novel next. So these two inputs is tracked here. It's under form inputs with the value title and value URL. So for updating the picture and the title, let's go again to mutations. We'll copy this out, we'll paste this, and then instead of delete novel, we'll call it update novel. And this will have, okay, let's go back to Apollo server, go back to cut all that, mutations, update novel. It'll have ID, title, image, and I want everything again. Just click everything here. I'll copy this out, I'll paste it out here, and I'll rename some of the values. This will be ID, this will be title, that's fine, image also is fine. Okay, so with this, our query for updating the novel, our mutation for updating the novel is done. Now let us create a function for it. So handle update novel, go on top, let's create that function now, and update novel. Okay, give them event, so form event dot, there's no dot, HTML form element dot prevent default, and we'll also, if there is no name, the name is empty, or if title is empty, or the URL is empty, I want to exit the function. Actually, I'll give a alert message. So alert saying please enter novel, or please enter fields. That's better. This is a validation. Now let us actually call this mutation update novel. So let me, don't need all this. Okay, let's create it here. Const update novel, and say use mutation. I've called it update novel. It takes in a few variables. ID will be ID, and title, and image will be URL. I'll also refetch the queries. So if I make changes, I want it to reflect in the UI, so that's why I'll do this. Refetch queries, query, I'll get novel, and I also have to pass in the variables, which is the ID. Okay, now I'll call this here. So update novel, I'll give the variables is ID is ID. You actually don't need to do this, but I'll do it just in case, because I've already mentioned it above. So image URL, and also set the title to empty string and set the URL to empty string. Save that, go back to next step. I'll cut all this up. Let me copy lose travel novel and take a link of it. So this one, copy image link. So let's call it Gulliver's Travel and give the URL, and I update it. Let's see whether it works. Open my, okay, so it's working. So we've successfully added the update functionality. Now let's do for the authors. So if I come down here, I've made a AI minus button. This is for deleting. Let's create one for adding an author. So here, so I'm tracking the name of the author with the state name, and I'll have to create a function now. So let's create it. I'll create it right here. Const, I'll copy all this. It's fine. So this time, if name is empty, return alert, please enter author name, and instead of this, we'll have to create a new mutation for that. So set name to null. Let's make a mutation for adding author name. So save that. Let's go here and let's create it here. So copy this out, paste it here, call it add author. GQL mutation will go back to Apollo server. Cut that out. Add author, name, ID, name, no ID. I'll copy this. And I'll paste it right here. This will be novel ID and name. Okay, that's fine. Let's go back here and let's call that now. So let's create it right. Okay, let's create it here. Add author. Again, use mutation. Call that mutation which we just made, add author. And this time we'll actually need some variables. Variables which will be the novel ID, and also name. Since the key and value have the same value with the same name, I've basically just put here name. Then let us refetch the queries as well. Refetch query, we'll get which one? Say get novel, and we'll also have to give it some variables, which is an ID, and we'll call it here now. Add author variables novel ID and as well as the name. I'll save that here. Let's check whether it's working. Let's say John. I mean no disrespect. Okay, why am I getting that error? Let's see. Add author. Okay, so we don't need this part. It's fine. Should come up here. Yeah, now I'm getting John. That is because I'm looping over the authors right here. Novel.authors map. I'm mapping through it. Now let's create a functionality for actually deleting an author. So for that, again, let's go back to mutations. Copy this out. Paste it here. I'll change the name to delete author. And let's go to Apollo server, go back and delete author. Just get everything, copy this out, paste it here, and instead of author ID, I'll just call it ID. Save it here, go to page. I've already made that function, delete author. We'll have to create that mutation. So let's create it right here. delete author. I'm just going to use mutation, feed it the mutation, which is delete author, and takes in some variables. Actually, we'll give it the variables directly in the JSX here. So for now, refetch queries, I'll say why that is shortly. Refetch queries, get me back, get novel, and the variables will be id, and I save that. So I'm not giving it the variables here is because I simply don't have access to it here, because that comes in an array of authors. It comes in an array of authors, and I cannot access individual author here. So what I'm doing is, if I go here, each novel has an authors, and in each authors I'm mapping through individual author. So then I have access to each ID. So what I do is, in the mutation here itself, I can say that the variables is id author.id. I couldn't do that here because it is an array of authors. Here now it's a single author. So that is why I'm doing it this way. So if I go back here, let's add test, add another one, wait for it, and if I click negative button, it should go. Yeah, it's gone. So with that, we've completed all of the functionalities of our application. So just to test everything out, go back here. I'll actually delete this. I'll delete this as well. Okay, I'll add a new novel. Say I'll take this one, copy image link. Out here, I'll paste it here. I'll call it levels 2. I add the novel. I'll wait for it for the queries to execute, and I've gotten it here. Then I can also delete it. Let me delete this. This has one author. I'll delete this one. It's making the queries here. That's gone. I can click read more. I can see what the info is. I can add new authors. John, again, no disrespect. I can add John 2, add John 3, add. If I go back, there are 3 authors. Here there's only 1 author. Here I can delete authors. John 2, if I go back, 2 authors. And I can also change the URL and the title. So copy image link, come here, paste it here, and deliver. Update. Again, it's making the queries for me. Everything executes. So hopefully this video is helpful to you guys. I'll link the code for this down in the description below. Thanks for watching.